things have changed. Funny, I mean, even cover letters, people don't do that anymore. And it's the writing sample. It's an opportunity to sell yourself. I mean, there's so much to a cover letter. But it also, if you're not a good writer, you don't have good grammar, it can show that too. So there's a double-edged sword. We've had people that have sent thank you notes to clients, and they've lost the job for themselves because it was poorly written.
Introducing Checkwriters, a video podcast for people who want to help their employees, colleagues, and organizations flourish and succeed. I'm your host, Dakota Hebert, Chief Marketing Officer at Checkwriters. Along with my co-host, HR Manager Felicia Corbeil, we'll hear from business leaders and pros who share captivating stories from their respective industries. Join us as we uncover their strategies and get unique inspiration for building great processes and experiences at your own organization. Check out and subscribe to Checkwriters on Apple, YouTube, or wherever you listen and watch your favorite shows. Thanks for watching. Employers, what are you looking for during your hiring process? At a minimum, it's going to be a solid resume, great communication skills, and evidence of that good old-fashioned work ethic. No one has it all, and even if they do, how do you keep them interested in this cutthroat job market? Andrea Cataldo is a staffing and recruiting industry stalwart with decades of experience helping organizations build out their dream teams. Andrea pays close attention to the chemistry between applicant and employer, and she's got some secrets on how to get the perfect match. Learn those secrets and recruiting strategies in this episode of Checkwriters. All right, so Andrea Cataldo, recruiter extraordinaire, thanks so much for coming on the Checkwriters podcast today. You're a little bit of a matchmaker between the employee and the employer, trying to find that elusive, maybe perfect candidate. Doesn't exist, like we were talking about before at lunch, but making sure that it's as best fit as possible, something that's going to last. Our first question is kind of using a well-known phrase, don't judge a book by its cover. And I mean, I actually judge books by their cover a lot. I think it works for books. But how do you think that statement relates to recruiting? And I'm thinking something like, for example, what if you've got a great candidate, like great resume, experience, everything, but they show up 10 minutes late? That's just an example. Like, how do you get past certain things to really evaluate, is this the right candidate for a given position?
Good question. I think as a recruiter, I've learned to definitely keep an open mind, even with a resume. If a resume isn't strong, I still want to meet with the person. So I think, definitely keeping that open mind is important. Also, I think the match is important. So 10 minutes late might not be a big deal to someone, but it could be a really big deal to someone else. Mm-hmm. So knowing that client, we had a not-for-profit client who hated when people were 2 minutes late. So when I would send people there, I'd say, listen, here's the deal. You have to be comfortable knowing you have to be on time. So we'd have that conversation ahead of time to make sure, that they were comfortable. And so I probably might not put that person, if they showed up late for an interview, with that client, but kind of knowing what's important to an organization, to a specific client, a specific manager. I think that's where the match happens, to know those things, learn about culture. And then also for the candidate, because the candidate, if that's not their strong suit, they're going to struggle all the time with a manager like that. So
it is really knowing both parties ahead of time. So how well would you say, how comfortable do you want to be with the employer before potentially placing a certain candidate with them? I think what does that early process look like? Yeah,
it makes all the difference. I really like to go to the office. I don't just like to take a quick phone call and then try to find someone for a client. So I like to go, and the picture's worth 1,000 words, right? You go and you
right back to the book analogies. I like it. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, but you can pick up a lot just by being in a space. How formal it is, how casual it is. Are people rushing around? You get a sense of pace. You get a sense of it. Just do people get along? Are they not? Are they quiet with their heads down? Are they interacting, very social? So you really can get a sense of the environment, and that helps a lot. So we do it a lot with intake calls with clients. We'll ask a lot of questions, but also if we can go beyond in person, it's great. It makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And then from like the employee's standpoint, so back to Dakota's analogy, where if someone's like 10 minutes late, I know for myself in HR and when I'm hiring people and interviewing people, it's hard to sometimes ignore certain things, right? Because it's like then you reflect back a few weeks into that person's employment and it's like that one thing they did during the interview. So, how do you decipher between, oh, this was just like a one time thing in the interview versus maybe this could be a potential problem?
Yeah, I think when red flags show up in an interview, you really have to pay attention to that as you're talking with someone and you're starting to get those things like this, because you know the role, right? You know the position, you know the company. You're talking to the person. If you, my gut has always served me well that way. So it's like 3 months down the road, I'm like, yep, I picked that up in the interview. I really wish I had paid more attention to that.
Yeah.
So that definitely happens. I think sometimes a few more steps. So if you see someone's like, we keep using that analogy, but someone's or they're too casual in their communication or something like that, we'll ask for a writing sample. Interact with them in different ways so that you get more comfortable. I think that's what I would do in those situations. And sometimes, if you love everything about the candidate, there's just that one thing, okay, fine. But if they're just okay, and that's might be the thing that knocks them out, and that's part of what people have to know as candidates, not to do that. So.
Yeah.
I was thinking what I would have a hard time with if I were you would be like, you obviously have your own personal red flags, but what if they don't match up with the employer? What if you're like, well, I can't stand that, but I know the employer won't mind. How do you get past that?
Well, I never place anyone in a company that I wouldn't want to sit next to and work next to. That's kind of my barometer.
Oh, that's a good barometer.
We always said that in the office too. I would say, no. If people say, well, maybe, I'd be like, come on, guys, do you want to sit next to this person? And like, if you don't, then we're not sending them to our client.
No, I mean, but that's a very easy reference point because also from the HR perspective, that's how I think of it too, is like, I'm not the one who's going to be directly working with this person. So sure, I can look at it from a top level and say, oh, well, maybe that's not a big deal. But the manager or the person hiring would be like, no, this is a big deal.
And you also know collectively what they're dealing with in their department. So if they have a lot of some behavior that they're trying to correct, you don't want to add another situation like that. You might want to add something that's actually the opposite, so it helps to move the team in a different direction.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it too. But it's all communication. It's all working with clients. The best clients that we have are the ones that really allow us to partner with them and really take the time to communicate with us so that we can look out for them.
Yeah. And speaking of that, so some employers have kind of a bad sense of some recruiting and staffing agencies. They might not get the best vibes from them. It might be because they've worked with other agencies that weren't very good. So you mentioned part of that when you're vetting an employer is to go into the office and have those conversations, answer those questions. But what else do you do to kind of generally make sure that employers are feeling comfortable with your services and not, anticipating the worst?
Yeah, that's the hardest thing I think about being in staffing and recruiting is you don't want to be cast with that same, reputation or, vibe that some of the companies work with. A lot are phenomenal and great. You just have to find the ones that you trust. And I think for me, it's always being authentic and honest, not trying to pull, something over on someone and always making sure that they're getting value for what they're asking for, that they don't feel like if something doesn't work out that you stand behind it for whatever reason. But I think it's about being honest. And clients know that. They feel it. They feel if you genuinely want to help them or if, you're just in it for a commission or something like that. So, I think it's, backing things up if something goes wrong or going the extra mile for whatever that could be. Following up, that's something that a lot of people don't do. I mean, I think being precise with details really matters because we're a service. So you shouldn't have to be struggling to, is the person coming today? Is this happening? What's happening with that? And offering extra things, so value-added things. Like we've talked about, extra doing reviews or counseling candidates or any of those things, the extras that don't typically happen in the industry because the industry moves really fast. So I think sometimes taking time to slow down and make sure everyone gets what they need.
When you said follow up, that made me think, there's a lot of things that we maybe took for granted years ago that people just don't do anymore. And I mean, following up is something that I hear a lot. Even, I mean, internal candidates like, that was such a great candidate. Why didn't they send a follow-up? This is crazy. Isn't that like a elementary thing? What type of things have you noticed like over the years, and you're thinking back like that was standard when I started in this industry, and now it's like pulling teeth or just hoping that somebody might do that?
A lot of things have changed. No, and it's funny. I mean, even cover letters, people don't do that anymore. And it's a writing sample. It's an opportunity to sell yourself. I mean, there's so much to a cover letter, but it also, if you're not a good writer, you don't have good grammar, it can show that too. So there's a double-edged sword. We've had people that have sent thank you notes to clients, and they've lost the job for themselves because it was poorly written. So we'll always say, just send it to us first.
Yeah.
We can take a look at it.
That's good. Little proofreading.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, on that note too, just to help people understand. So you've been in recruiting since 1990. Is that right?
Yes,
Around
that is
then?
correct. Yes, I had to check. Yes, that's correct.
So over 30 years of recruiting through a couple different businesses, which is amazing. You must have learned so much along the way. You've had so many experiences and things that you've worked with and talked to people with. And so one thing with recruiting, it kind of, spills into HR a little bit. So throughout your career and throughout your time working in this industry, do you find yourself more like on the recruiting end of things, or more like the HR type of leadership, organizational type things?
Well, it depends on my role. So when I owned my own company, I had to do all of it. So a lot of the strategic, and I had to do the compliance, I had to do all of it. And our clients are HR people. So I live and work in that space, right? So I have a huge affinity for HR people and a huge respect for them as well. I mean, especially during the pandemic, they were frontline, and Felicia, you know what it was
I do
like.
know.
Yep,
Yes.
yep. If they were underappreciated before the pandemic, they should be very appreciated now. So I guess I'm in all facets, but I do really love recruiting because it's fast paced, it's creative. So I do enjoy that. And I'm a marketing person, and recruiting is marketing. It really is. It's trying to get in front of people and capture their attention for a position. So it's, yeah.
Why don't you give us a little bit of context for the audience too, about your background, just quickly, because you owned your own company and you built it to a very successful organization, sold it. If you could give a little background on that.
Sure. So I started in the industry in Boston and Cambridge with a national staffing company. I got just enough experience in how to do things. And then I had the opportunity to come to Western Mass, which I had tons of family, and I had gone to college out here. So I came out to start the business with some people that had been in the industry. So it was a great opportunity. It was 1995, and we weren't a typical startup. We had business right away. I was more the person in the back office trying to figure out everything. At lunch, we talked about doing payroll. I actually did payroll, and that's not my strong suit at all. But for this business, I had to do it all. So I did. I did the computers. I did it all. And so we had a really fast start into the market and grew quite a bit. And so I think it was 28 years. And then as an exit strategy, sold to Bank W. So about a year and almost a year.
And are they're a national or regional?
Regional.
Yep.
Yep. So Boston and New Hampshire. So really all the New England states.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, 6 offices. So it's been nice to be part of a bigger organization. That's been fun. Yeah. But I mean, as part of Western Mass, we had 3 offices. We were in the Berkshires, Northampton, and Springfield.
Mm-hmm.
And our headquarters were in Springfield for a really long time. And we worked with, higher education organizations, manufacturers, a lot of local businesses, insurance, big insurance companies, all that. It was great.
Did you have a preferred industry? Because those are very different types of recruiting responsibilities.
Yeah, they were. But we did mostly administrative, accounting, HR, marketing. So we stayed in that.
Oh, okay.
So we didn't do manufacturing or, we didn't do IT really, just a little bit.
Got it.
So yeah.
We got somebody from IT from you once.
Yeah. Did you?
A little bit of IT. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We did some help desk and some of that for sure. We did. Yep. I mean, I liked all our clients for different reasons. Yeah.
So how many interviews do you think you've conducted over your career? 10,000?
I don't know. know, because in my role, I didn't have as much of the contact on that side. I did more on the client side. Early on, I did quite a few. When I worked for the national staffing company, I was surprised. I was right out of college, and the things that I was responsible for with no experience.
Yeah.
But I got a lot of good experience. That way.
The reason I asked is because obviously we've all been on job interviews, and I've been on some that went great and others that were not so great. But I think a lot of folks would say, like, depending on the job, you could be kind of nervous on a job interview. And one that I think back to, I don't think I've ever been like nervous going into a job interview, but one of them, it was kind of goes with the role, but they definitely were trying to like trip me up, frazzle me, make me nervous on purpose. And it definitely, it turned me off to the job, which was probably good because they were probably trying to do that. They tried to probably filter it out. But what do you think about that tactic in recruiting? Have you ever, has an employer ever requested that you kind of like ask certain questions that could be designed to elicit certain responses from people in that way?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the shock type questions or the things that make people think on their feet, or unless it really relates to the role. I mean, sometimes you can make that connection, then the candidate won't be as off put because you said, like maybe it related to something that they do. I'm not a fan of that. Sometimes like the ethical questions are interesting too. They'll pose a question to you that's like, it's one of those just tough ones that you really can't answer it right. And it's like an ethical question. Those are hard. I don't like when you it's hard enough to be a candidate, right? It's not easy. So it's when you do that, it's tough. We have definitely had people that, needed someone to work in like a fast paced environment. So like we needed to figure out, could they work in that type of environment? So there's certain questions we certainly will ask for clients, but I don't know, it's just hard to be a candidate. So I just never wanted to try to trip them up or make them nervous.
Yeah, it's funny. You do see those, they come through on like articles different articles that they're kind of clickbait, but like, it's like, oh, ask this one question to learn about somebody, like whatever. And it's like a secret question. Like you said, maybe an ethical one. And there's no right response, but they're thinking, oh, if they answer this maybe in this way, then it'll tell me that they're really like this. You don't really buy into that stuff.
I mean, you can. Everyone has their own interviewing style. So when I interview, I'm typically interviewing for a wide range of opportunities. So someone comes to us, and they're not always coming for one specific role. They're coming because they need help finding a role. So when I interview them, which is sort of an advantage because I interview them.
That's a good point. Yeah, you're looking. You have a roster in your mind, like these could be potential jobs for this person.
Right.
So you're trying to get a holistic view of the candidate.
You are the matchmaker.
Right. And
there you go. Yeah.
they try. So they tend to be honest because they're not trying to sell me that they could do this role. They come to us and they'll say, this is really what I want. And I really think I work best in this environment. We have those conversations like holistically ahead of time. And then when the opportunity comes up, I can be like, this would be good for them. This probably wouldn't. They might tell me that that's going to be okay, but they already told me they really don't want that. So it's nice. I mean, because we get that opportunity.
Yeah, that sounds like an advantage for a recruiting and staffing firm.
Yeah. Definitely an advantage for an employee or, a candidate seeking work. And I know, so I have a few friends that I've suggested where, I tell them like, oh, reach out to, these staffing agencies. They're really great. We work with them. And their immediate question is, don't I have to pay for that? Or why would I do that? Like, I don't know. That seems weird to me. So what would you say to those people who have that concern in the back of their mind? Like the prospective employee, of course.
Absolutely. So first, they should never have to pay a fee as a candidate. So you should run if you see that. That's not a good thing. And, I would say it's definitely worth their time for a lot of reasons. It's a practice interview. Typically will help with a resume, will help with interview prep, will help them understand the market and what their skills could command in the market. Will help them think about other ways to use their skills, transferable opportunities. And we do it all. We don't charge anything, so it's like somebody else working on your behalf in the market. You have to be selective of who you go to. You want to make sure you're with a reputable recruiter who who works with people with your skills, because some, again, specialize in other areas. So yeah, I think it can be incredibly beneficial. And we typically have the inside track on what the client's looking for, so we can help candidates. We can help make a good match ahead of time because we know what they've hired before and who they like. We can see how the person would fit, and then we can prep them and help them, in the interview, make sure you talk about this experience or make sure you do that. So it's like an inside person helping them. So there's a lot of advantages to it for sure, but you just have to find the right one.
So it sounds like those advantages for the candidate would, ideally, prove to be advantages for the employer too, because they're going to get somebody who's a better fit. What other type of advantages on the employer side, working with a group like yours?
So a lot. I think the best thing, the end result is hopefully you're going to have 3 finalists, right? You're not going to have to spend the money to first of all, to do a posting that's effective, and then post it somewhere, and then cull through all those candidates. Or if for some reason you're not getting candidates, figure out, well, am I in the wrong place? Where should I be hiring these candidates, finding these candidates? And then all the pre-work is done for you. So we're going to obviously pre-screen, we're going to do interviews, we're going to set all those interviews up when it's time for them to meet with you. We do a presentation to you. So we talk about what their skills are, why we think they're a fit. So you get that all done ahead of time. And the goal is that literally you just can get to that finalist stage and meet 2 to 3 people and you pick one. And then, we obviously stand behind that as well.
Yeah. So it's one thing that I'm thinking of is you're obviously cutting down a lot of the work, sifting through all those resumes, right?
Yes, it's always very helpful to just have them come right to my inbox.
That's the goal. I mean,
with an exact write-up of the person.
That's what we try to do. I mean, and depending on the role, sometimes we'll do pre-employment testing too, so you can see those types of results. Yeah, it's there's a lot to it to make it much easier. The other thing too is recruiters are constantly talking to people, and we tend to specialize. So if it's HR, if it's marketing, if it's administrative, whatever it is. So we're talking to those people all the time. So there's an inventory of those people. So, and we're also tapping on shoulders, like, proactive recruiting is what we call it. So we might be on LinkedIn and we might be reaching out on a daily basis to a few candidates that, for a few hours. We might go on and just send an email to this one or that one. And are you looking for a new opportunity? Would you be interested in a proactive conversation? So we're getting those candidates that are passive candidates that you might not reach with a job ad.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What do you think about LinkedIn for recruiting? I know it's one thing that, I go on LinkedIn, I see the people's profile pictures where it says currently hiring or currently looking for a job. How effective do you think it is when you're reaching out to people on LinkedIn?
I do like LinkedIn a lot for recruiting. I think, there's obviously you can learn about their background. You can see the type of posts that they put out there. You can, you can see if they're open to behind the scenes. You can see if they don't put open to work with the big ring, you can see if they're open to opportunities. You can you can learn a lot about them, but you can see a little bit about their professionalism too. Kind of posts are they putting? Are they positive? Are they negative towards an employer? What kind of organizations are they following? Are they putting up, are they like an idea expert, or are they putting something, not so positive out there? So you can learn a lot, I think. I do. I like it. There's a lot of people to find, I think, for passive for sure. And I think the job postings can be done very tactically. They've changed it a lot on LinkedIn, so you can tailor what your job postings are to certain skill sets, and I find it a better pool of people a lot of the time, better way to find people.
I've been noticing lately that LinkedIn feels like it's getting a little bit spammy, like email.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah.
I also don't like when it feels like Facebook. I'm like, oh, please no. Like,
I totally agree. Like,
Yes.
It's not a personal platform.
no,
Like,
I was
I don't
reading
want
one
to
the
see
other night.
dogs. I just said this the other day.
Yep.
I think I said this on another
You did.
podcast interview.
It was on a podcast.
I don't want to see people's dogs on LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's it's going in that direction. I'm not comfortable with it either. Like, please, we have one place that's just
It
professional.
really,
Just
yeah,
one
that's
place.
what it was supposed to be.
Yep.
But there's plenty of people who keep it that way. So we were talking a little earlier about that elusive ideal candidate. And does the ideal candidate even exist? And you're probably going to say no, but if it doesn't, is it worth kind of like chasing that potential ideal candidate? And also, you already talked a little bit about this, but are there actually just like multiple good candidates for any good given position, and you really want to kind of present, like you said, maybe the top 2 or 3 to an employer, rather than keep searching for I got to find the right one for him?
Yeah, I don't think there is an ideal candidate. I mean, we're human, right? So everyone brings something. I mean, there are certainly some that are better than others, better workers, better skills, any of those things, better interpersonal skills. So I don't think there's a perfect candidate. I think there are better candidates than others for certain managers, or for certain environments. So I think that's where you can, be selective and should be. And I think there's something to be said for developing talent too, right? So bring in someone that you feel would fit in your culture, that has the right attitude and has the basic skills, and then you can develop from there. So,
is that kind of what we were talking about earlier at lunch? Is that an opportunity to kind of build loyalty with that person to the organization also?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's lots of ways, hopefully, to build loyalty, right? But I think, sure, if someone feels you took a chance on them or you're investing in them, I think that's huge. Rather than, just sit at a desk and get all this work done for me. It's like, oh, they really care about me. They're letting me, do all these learning opportunities or, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you, when in your time as a business owner, when you had to kind of play that role as manager, again, you also mentioned previously kind of making sure that you found the thing for each person to kind of keep them motivated. So what are some things that you kind of found commonly would help keep that motivation and help keep that person engaged and interested in their position so that there was that retention factor as well?
Yeah, I mean, retention was huge for me. Being in a relationship business and in a small community, it was important, and we worked really hard. So it was a big deal if someone left, or it would be a big gap on the team. I think as a manager, it's really helpful if you get to know each person and what motivates them at work. Why they're working and what makes them really happy at work. Some people, it's autonomy. Like, just give me the rules and let me do my thing, and I'll be happy. I'll check back when I need you. That's some people. Other people want to know they're working for an organization with integrity, right? That they feel proud of the organization. So you have to always make sure that they see the opportunities, like, okay, they see you doing things that they can be proud of, and that it aligns with their values. It can be that. It could be work-life flexibility, and if you can offer it, you have so much more going for you than another opportunity. They're less likely to go and do something like that. For others, it can be team camaraderie. It can just be like that there's a good feeling in the office. So you kind of have to know each person. I've had some that wanted to give back to the community, and I was like, great, that's a win-win for all of us. Find some not-for-profit organizations that you're passionate about. Take some time during the workday. Go represent our company there. That's great, and it could be really fulfilling. So it can be. I think you just have to know your employees and know what matters to them, but you can't just go and try to extract that information because you're trying to leverage it. I think they have to know you really care and you really want to make them happy, and that you're really trying to sort of offer something special to them, and that you care about them staying. And I think the other big piece is for them to be heard. I think if they have a challenge or something, you have to really listen. You can't always fix it, can't always change it, but I think if you listen and try to explain why something is the way it is.
Well, it's funny because, of course, I feel like we've switched so much back and forth here between the employee side of things, the employer side of things. Of course, both are very important in the whole recruiting process. But so I had a professor at American International College where I got my MBA, and he had said at one point that as a professional person, you should be adding something to your resume every single year. Some sort of, volunteer certification job. You should not be getting a new job every year, but something, additional that you can put on your resume. Do you agree with that?
That's interesting. I think it's always good to be growing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I would be thinking about it in terms of my resume, but I especially people right out of school, I always say, take the job where you're learning the most and you can develop the most, because then down the road you'll be worth more, versus the one that gives you the higher salary right away, but then you're sort of stuck. I always say, look at that organization where you can grow and there'll be opportunity. Don't look so much at that initial pay rate.
That's got to be hard for some people.
Well, especially because they're coming out of school with loans and everything. Yeah. Yep. I just did a career panel at one of the schools, and I'm like, guys, I know it's hard to hear this, but if you can do it, it's the best thing to do, because in short order, you will be making more money and you'll be on a trajectory to do better.
Now, what is the career panel? Is that like a job fair type of thing?
It was it was with Bay Path University, so we were a bunch of business people. We kind of helped the school a little bit, and so we were. It was just like an evening with the students.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so it was fun. Yeah.
Do you find those are pretty good events? Like you've done those extensively?
Yeah, I do them. It's a nice way to engage with candidates, and typically, that's one of the ways we get candidates in the community. That's different than doing a job post, right? Because that's one way, but we do a lot of other things to get candidates to come and talk with us. But it's a nice way to give back too. And I find the students are they're inspirational. They're amazing, some of their stories, and it's infectious too. You see them working really hard to improve themselves, their life, and it's cool. It's fun to be able to give back and go, okay, this was my experience. This is what I would suggest, and they take advice and run with it. They're impressive.
And you serve on the board of Bay Path, right?
I do.
How long
Yeah.
have you been doing that?
I was on my second stint, so I think I'm in like my year 5 on the board. But I also I was on their advisory council for like 20 years. So
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
did you go there?
I did not. No, my
Okay.
mom did.
Okay.
So yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
a nice connection, though.
Yeah, and my son, when they had a preschool, he went there. So I'm the only
Oh, they
one
had a
that hasn't.
preschool.
They did for a while.
That's quite the range in age.
It is. It is. Yep.
So then when you're looking at resumes, if you're not necessarily looking for something every year, which I agree is maybe a little much, what are you looking for? Especially because, like you mentioned, you're not placing the employee or the person at a specific job. You're just kind of getting a feel for them and what they might be capable of. So what kind of things are you looking at?
Well, so maybe not the every year thing, but I think like LinkedIn does certifications. You can take classes and different things. So there's lots of ways to do volunteer work. So there's lots of ways to, and also develop within your company, take on micro projects or little other things, help in other departments, show that you're interested in the growth of the organization you're working for, and how do you contribute. So those would be things that I would as someone that was trying to grow my career, I'd be thinking about those things. And then as an interviewer, I would be looking at those types of things. I love to see volunteer work. I think that's nice. It says a little bit about the person. I mean, if they can, their life could be busy and they just don't have time. They could sometimes have 2 jobs because they're paying college loans off or whatever. I do like to see that too. I like to see when people worked while they were in college. That's impressive to me. You'll see on a resume sometimes, funded my college education while working full time. I mean, that blows me away when I see that. I think
Jamie
it's
did.
amazing.
Jamie's doing it again.
Jamie's still working while she's going for her MBA.
She's writing a paper right now.
That's awesome. I
Yeah.
mean, back in the day when Bay Path had their Saturday program, I mean, they would go work all week, have, other family responsibilities, and go to school all day on Saturday. When I would see that on a resume, I would be just amazed.
Yeah.
So, you have a worker there. You have someone
Yeah.
motivated.
When I was going for my MBA, it was during 2020, and so I was a mom working full time. And AIC, actually, this is my plug for AIC. They were the only college in the area that actually offered an in-person night course. So I was able to go at night. It ended quickly, of course, because COVID happened. But I think they resumed that. So for me, I thought that was amazing, so that I didn't have to do something online, and I was still able to work full time, have my mom duties, and then do my homework kind of on the weekends. So
You're unique in wanting that. It's interesting, the in-person. I think the online education has been a game changer for women in particular, moms that are, have all those responsibilities because they can put the kids to bed and then do the asynchronous, right? Learning. So I think that's been nice, but no.
I mean, they can do it on their own time.
Exactly.
It's not a live class. Yeah.
Yep.
But you wanted the in-person.
yeah, for me, I don't feel like I learn as much when I go do something online. It doesn't feel as real, I guess. So for me, I really liked that I was able to do in-person classes for a solid 2 months before switching over to online just because of COVID. But I really liked that I was able to do that.
What do you think about that with online versus in-person with interviewing? Because that's I would think that. I mean, I think back again to some of the interviews I've had. I don't think I ever had an online interview because I was kind of done looking for jobs before that happened. Before everything
Found your
went
life job
virtual.
here
Yeah. Yeah, I probably won't interview again.
Yeah, that's what I thought though too. So you never know.
Oh yeah, really. But one of the best interviews I had was like it was very casual. It was like over lunch, and it was just very candid. And I think back to that, and it's almost like, well, I think definitely the setting kind of set the stage for a very informal interview where both of us could ask questions without kind of like this formality to it that could have colored either of our opinions. But what do you think about that? Like the difference between remote and in person, and even if different locations or interview styles are either better, or if you're thinking, yeah, we really lost that, but we've gained this with online interviewing. What do you think?
So the difference between like a casual interview and a formal one, I tend to be more the casual type, but you can get yourself into trouble with that. You can introduce a little bias that you don't even mean to. And you can get into areas you shouldn't be talking about too. That can happen. You end up talking about kids. You're not supposed to talk about those things. So you have to be.
So even there's compliance considerations.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you have to be a little careful with that. But I do find, people, if you're more genuine, people bring their genuine self, and that's always where I want to be in an interview. I don't want the canned answers. I don't want that. But if you're doing large scale interviewing and you're concerned about, you think there could be some bias in the process, I think it's nice to have a series of questions that you ask everyone. For me, I probably would be in the middle somewhere. I'd have some. If I was interviewing a lot of people, I would have some specific questions I would ask everyone so that it's more of an even playing field. And then I would want to get a little into the sort of more comfortable things. Back to your other question before about how do you feel about not sort of throwing people off. I don't think you typically get the best out of people when you make them nervous, and, I'd really want them to feel comfortable. So that's where I tend to be with interviews.
Do you find it's harder to do that virtually?
Well, so interesting. So we always interviewed everyone in person up to the pandemic. And when we had to start on Zoom, I thought this is going to be a nightmare.
Yeah.
This is going to be tough.
It's a big change, yeah.
It was a huge
Overnight.
change. It was a huge, and it was seamless. We were shocked. We didn't have a single, knock on wood somewhere, a single problem with it. And it was candidates. It was great for candidates because we ended up seeing more people. And that was a time where it was really hard to find people to work. So the fact that we made it easy for candidates, and so they could come and talk to us, so that was good. I do caution candidates though. Sometimes you see far into their life that you shouldn't. If their like background is inappropriate, you see like dirty laundry, you see family, you see, lots of crazy things. We, as recruiters, have shared some of those crazy things with each other. They'll be like, look what I saw in my interview today.
You can share a couple now anonymously if you want.
There was one where someone was watching something inappropriate on TV and left the screen on pause. And so
That almost sounds like on purpose.
I know. I don't know how you do that.
Like they were messing with you.
Yep.
Did they think they had their background blurred or something?
I don't know.
Maybe they thought that it was actually like that fake Miami condo view behind them that people here sometimes use,
I know.
It's like, I know you're sitting in I know that you're not in Miami, basically.
Yeah. Right. I know. Those are so hard too. I just blur my background because it's like, I don't want people seeing like my bookshelves or whatever, but at the same time, I don't want to look like I'm in some penthouse somewhere.
Well, you probably have some good books on your bookshelf. Nothing weird.
No, I definitely don't have anything weird on my bookshelf.
You just mean it might be a little disheveled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny you say that. So I don't typically blur out my background because I'm always here in the office. So I don't think much of it because I'm like, oh, yeah, our office is beautiful. So I have this beautiful background. But it's funny you say that because a few weeks ago, I was talking with a vendor, actually, and they pointed out the pictures of my kids in the background. And I was like, oh, I guess I didn't even realize you could really see that. So now it did make me very aware of what people can see. And I was like, ooh, maybe I should join the blurred background crew.
I know, it's hard. It's such a new world with Zoom and interviewing. And the first interview on Zoom is great, but I do think an in-person interview is important, for the ultimate job.
Okay. Yeah. I was going to ask that.
It doesn't replace it.
No, one of the things that for the candidate too, as I was saying, when I meet a client, I like to see the candidate needs to see where they're going to go to work. There's nothing worse than the first day they walk in and it's like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. It's too busy. It's too quiet. It's whatever. So they get a much they're much more comfortable, and when they accept a role, I think they feel more knowledgeable if they get to come in person.
Do you ever find that people can also give off such varying impressions on over Zoom versus in person? Because I've found that a little bit. Like, I met you on Zoom and then I meet you in person, and it's just like you're very different.
Yeah, that can happen. Yeah, that makes me nervous. I have to be honest, that can happen.
So you like to have both?
I do. Yeah.
Well, and I find even there's times where I talk to somebody on the phone first. That's usually kind of where we start, is with a general phone screen. And everything with the phone screen goes really great. Then we invite them in. And there are so many times where I look at the person and I hear their voice again. And I just think to myself, are you the person I talked to on the phone? Because I really don't think you are.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's kinda
there's
like,
no way to prove it, of course. But just like...
oh, that would be. Oh, you're
way
thinking
that
maybe
they-
it really was. Yeah.
in the way
That
that
would be
they
weird.
talk, it's different sometimes versus on the phone and in person. And you have to question, is it because they're nervous? Is it because they had someone else do the phone interview for them? Do you ever find that happens to you?
Well, it's interesting because if we meet someone on Zoom, right, and then someone else checks the ID,
Right.
it could be someone different, so that's something that we have to be careful of. Yeah.
I think writing samples are awesome. Even if you have a tough time with writing, so few people can write today. I mean, I'm sure you know, but like you see some of the emails that come through, no greeting, they don't sign their name, and then like sometimes it's not even capitalized. It's a total mess. But one of my first jobs was like all writing. Like it was a completely writing based job, and the whole interview process was submit a writing sample. Got an interview after that, submit a couple more writing samples, then go into the office and do a timed writing exercise. But I remember the guy who was interviewing me said when I got there, because it was in DC and I had to fly down to DC for it. And the first thing he said was, the only reason you're here is because of your writing sample. I was like, okay, so I guess the resume was bad or something. But it's fun. It's like you said, like some things are super important to certain people, and for them it was like, if you can write, you'll get the job. Otherwise, it doesn't even matter what you say.
Yeah. No, writing is interesting because before, we didn't communicate with clients and things. We would call them. Now you're writing to them in email. So it matters. I've had people that have applied for roles in our office and they'll send me like text language and I'm like, whoa, and this is a professional follow-up. Talk about follow-up after
Right.
interview. It's a professional follow-up and it's not even whole words. And it's yeah. So you see that a lot. And I think with the younger generation, not to stereotype, but if they haven't been prepared with college career counseling or some advice, they won't appropriately respond. And I think it's important because you look at that and go, okay, that you're going to talk to fellow employees that way. You're going to talk to clients that way. So that's a no-go. If you think that's appropriate, you're going to do that again.
Yeah, it sounds like it's kind of part of the overall trend of society, which is just like the casualification of everything. It's writing, it's dress, it's the way people speak to each other. It's like there's no formality, and it's good to have, like you said, like you like those casual conversations with candidates, but it's a professional industry. You need to have a level of professionalism in order to get through the process.
Yeah. And so speaking of that professionalism, so if let's say we hire a candidate, you've vetted the candidate's amazing. The employer's like, yes, this candidate's great. We love them. The candidate starts and then you get that like honeymoon period and it ends after a month. What do you do when those things happen?
Well, typically we're keeping in touch with the clients. We kind of have a sense it's starting to go that way. We'll counsel the candidate a lot of the time, find out what the issue is, and we'll counsel the candidate to hopefully get past that. This is going to sound untrue or self-serving, but we don't actually have that happen that often because I think we do a lot of due diligence up front. I mean, it certainly can happen. Sometimes it's an environment mismatch, or sometimes their life changes, right? And you can't predict that, and that could happen with anyone. So there's certainly circumstances you can't foresee, but if you do good due diligence up front, it shouldn't happen too much.
Is there a time period you find where, if that does happen, if that honeymoon period ends, is there a time period you find that it's kind of most commonly occurring in?
I think there's no surprise that people have 90-day waiting periods, and staffing typically does 3 months to 4 or 5 months. I think that 3-month mark. I mean, people can be on their best behavior for a while, but in 3 months, I think you're starting to see their normal habits. You're starting to see if they're late to work, and think if they're absent a lot, things like that. So I think 90 days is typically. I mean, if you're seeing it early, that's not a good sign.
Right. If you're seeing it on the first day, that is not good.
No.
They probably misrepresented themselves a little bit. Yeah.
Probably a lot. Yeah.
So in today's job market, and maybe it was so in the past also, but we hear a lot of employers. I mean, you see it offering various incentives. I mean, sometimes in the hospitality industry, maybe you'll see a big sign that says $1,000 if you sign on or whatever, all the way up to my wife is a nurse, and some of the sign-on incentives are like $15,000 for that. Yeah. And those are some things. There's sign-on bonuses, maybe other incentives. What do you think about those? Are those helpful? Are you ever asked to present those to potential candidates?
So we typically don't do sign-on bonuses. We'll do retention bonuses. Certainly, we've had clients where if it's a temporary role, but they really need to make sure the person stays, we'll stagger retention bonuses in there. We had a college that we worked with, and we had they were staffing for reunion. So it would be a disaster if the person that we sent that would work there for a few months quit right before reunion, right? So we would do some bonuses and things like that. I think with sign-on bonuses, the concern I have is, obviously you get the attention, you get applicants to apply, but what about your permanent people that are there, that you really think are wonderful, and they're there being loyal and working hard, probably harder than before because you're down people and they're having to pick up the slack. And then this other person gets, just for showing up the first day, it's a bonus. That's a hard one. I think you can really off-put your loyal employees with those. So it's a balancing act. And then
that's a good point.
Yeah, if you do a retention bonus for them, but then you're breaking the bank at that point. You're paying everybody for being there.
Yeah.
And that's also kind of the same concept as when, especially during the pandemic, people were offering just insane salaries and not necessarily paying their current employees, that same salary. So it was like, this person's coming on with no experience and they're making more than me. And it's never a good balance.
But do you find that kind of happens like the squeaky wheel gets the grease? It's like the loyal person who never complains, and they're kind of like, it's kind of like a trope. It's like the stalwart like old guard, and it's like, oh, I don't have to worry about them, but I need some like fresh blood in here, so let's just give out some bonuses.
Yeah. No, I think in Massachusetts in particular, you have to be really careful, right? You can't have two people doing the same job with big pay disparity.
Oh, right, yeah. That's a recent law?
In the last couple of years, yeah. So you have to be super careful of that. So that would not be a good thing.
Well, so like you mentioned, though, I mean, in terms of helping these people, helping the employers, making sure that they're retaining their people, whether it be through bonuses or other measures, you also work so closely with so many of these employers. So what advice do you have for employers just generally about retention, operations, day-to-day management?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good thing. We see good managers, we see not so good managers. Most of, our clients are phenomenal. But you do, I mean, you get to see it all. I think it's about management. It's about treating people well, right? So every situation is different. So someone might have a job that's really demanding and difficult to fill. So then you have to do certain things for that. Others, I guess it's a case-by-case situation, I think, to find out why people are leaving, or why the successful people are successful and why they stay, how to replicate that. I think it's hard to generalize and say, this one thing will work everywhere. It tends to be very targeted. You have to kind of hear the challenge and dig in a little bit, and then come up with some creative solutions. That's one of the things I love about it. It's not canned. It's not like, oh, this is our one solution for this, and this is our one solution for that. It's getting in there and getting creative. Those are our most satisfying client relationships. I think the ones where we get in and really try to help.
That made me think of something during your answer that. When people think of recruiting agency or a staffing agency, you immediately are thinking of the candidate, and the candidate has to impress you, and the candidate has to put their best foot forward. But the way you phrase that, it's equally incumbent upon the employer to impress you too, so you can say, you know what, I've got some of my best people that I think they would be great fit for these employers or these managers because they've shown me that they're gonna be a good match for this person and serve them well too, because you obviously want to please both parties.
We definitely do. And that's kind of nice for candidates. We talked before about like why I work with a staffing company. We can tell candidates, this is a phenomenal company. It's, this is what people like about it. So giving them that inside track, which is nice. And I mean, through the years, I was really careful to only work with companies that I would want to work at or I would feel comfortable sending people. I mean, we definitely fired clients sometimes if they were, not nice to candidates, whatever. We didn't want that. We didn't want to refer people places where they weren't going to be happy. So if we saw that or someone was developing a bad reputation, it didn't happen very often, but if it did, we would sort of disassociate because, we do care quite a bit about the candidates and that they're happy. And typically they'll come back to us, for other jobs later on down the road or refer friends, family. And that's a great way to find candidates that, the clients aren't going to necessarily come across those candidates if we're not doing it. So.
And so one thing that I noticed in kind of doing some research on your business and when you kind of were acquired by the larger firm is you retained 100% of your clients during that merge, which is unheard of for people. So from looking at it from the employer side of things, how did you maintain those clients that you had during that transition?
We have really good relationships with our clients, and the team stayed intact that serviced them. So we really tried to insulate the clients from any kind of disruption or any kind of, anything through the transition. And the acquiring company was Bank W. They were great about, giving us the resources we needed. So, it was a team effort, I guess, all around. So that was important. And you got to manage the details. You have to be paying attention to what's happening so nothing falls through the cracks. So it was a lot of time doing that integration stuff, saying, "Oh, what about this? Or this could happen? Or now this is done differently. That's going to miss this." So it was a lot of being careful and everybody working together. We have a great team, so that really makes a big difference. Yeah, and great clients too. Honestly, they were so happy, because it was a good thing. I mean, there's more resources available, so our clients were very supportive of the move, and it was seamless for them. But we couldn't have done it without their support as well.
Oh, that's great.
Do you read Inc. magazine ever?
Sometimes.
Yeah, I see their stuff on LinkedIn a lot. But there was an article last week, and I don't know who the author was, but he's a New York Times bestselling author, and he wrote a book called "Never Say These Words in a Job Interview." So kind of one of those, maybe what we were talking about earlier, like, not necessarily things that kind of like headline grabbing things rather than potentially very sound advice when you're trying to be the matchmaker between an employer and employer. But one of the key points that he made in the article that I thought made a lot of sense, and it goes to what you were talking about with being genuine on both sides of the process. But he said the best candidates show some flaws, and obviously there's kind of like a balance between that. But what do you think about that, and how have you counseled people to kind of say, like, show a little humanity or flaws in this because it gives them an opportunity to show how they could overcome it?
Yeah, I think it's good not to give what are your weaknesses? Oh, I'm, always on time.
Exactly.
It's like the canned answer. It's like, okay, that was a wasted
I'm
question.
a perfectionist.
Exactly.
Yeah, I care too much. Yeah.
All of that. I think if you can be genuine with something that you it's a point of development for you, something like that you need to develop better, that you have a plan for that. Like, I'm not great at, I wouldn't say it that way. I'd say one of the areas I hope to grow in is, my use of Excel or my ability to, interview well or whatever it is. I think if you can say, but this is what I'm doing to get better at that, I think that shows you're a self-starter, you're motivated. Like, I think there's a way to frame it so that it's like, yep, I'm human. I have some humility here. I'm saying that I have room to grow. A little self-awareness is a good thing in a candidate and a client and employee. But then showing you have a plan for it, I think shows.
So you don't want to just list your weaknesses. You want to be like, here are some things, but I'm show some light at the end of the tunnel too.
I think so, that
Yeah.
you're self-aware, but that you also want to work on it and have a plan for that, yeah. Or that, you would look to your employer to provide those resources, and you would be very happy to take part, yeah.
So along that line, like I think that's great advice. But what are some of the couple rapid fire? Here are Andrea's best advice to candidates in today's market.
So we have some amazing recruiters on the team. And the other day I heard someone say something. I was like, oh, I haven't heard that one before. And it's, that's rare, right? I've heard a lot of it before. And he was saying, every time I do an interview prep with candidates, I tell them, if they like the job, make sure you tell the hiring manager that you are excited about the role and that you would love to have the role. And it's such an easy thing, but you're not selling yourself if you don't. And lots of times we'll hear back from hiring managers, yeah, they didn't seem really excited about the role. I don't know. And it's like, but they talk to us like, oh, that would be so great. It's like, oh, why didn't you share that? And not in an inappropriate way, but just more like this, and why you like it. Not just like, oh, this fits really well with my schedule. And more like, wow, I'm really impressed with the work you do here. It seems like a great environment. I could see myself contributing in this way. Those types of things at the end of the interview, I think it's a smart thing to do. Not in an aggressive way, but just more of like a professional, this is what I think I would bring and I would really enjoy it.
Yeah, that's great
That is
advice.
a-
I
that
would
is good
think
advice.
I would think people would hesitate to do that because it could come off as kind of forward. But like you said, there's a little bit of finesse there, professional way, not like I'm going to get this job because,
No.
but it's more like just wrapping up the interview by saying, I really like this opportunity. I think I could do a great job with it. They might do that in the follow-up, but like you said, their opportunity is probably right at the tail end of that interview. Probably in person is gonna be when it'll make the biggest impression.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And as somebody who's, I'm in on all the interviews here, so somebody who's hiring, that would be so much better to hear from a candidate when they're leaving as kind of like a thank you, goodbye, like that kind of, setup. But then sometimes I have candidates who will either say when they're leaving or email kind of more on that aggressive side where they're like, you won't be disappointed if you choose me, which is
Yeah.
kind
It's a little
of
cheesy.
yeah. Or they'll be like, oh, like I look forward to being able to take this role or something like that, where it's kind of like you said, almost like a little too much. It's not always something that, means that we're not going to hire them, but sometimes it's like, that's a little much. And that also is like, I don't want them to have gotten the wrong impression that they are just going to get the role. Right. So I think that's a perfect way for a candidate to kind of just say like, yeah, thank you so much. This sounds really exciting. I can't wait to hear back from you. Like just something more casual like that would definitely be a lot better to hear.
Right. Yep. Yeah, you can definitely handle that the wrong way, being too aggressive. And it's, it's hard to be a candidate. It really is. Like so many times I was talking to one yesterday and she's like, I had 4 interviews. I drove to Boston for an interview and they never followed up and they hired someone else. And she was referred by an internal candidate, like an internal employee. And I thought, that's awful. You feel so bad, and she's professional and nice and there's no reason to ghost her. So I think as employers, we really have to manage our own reputation and brand, because if your hiring process turns candidates off, that's not going to be good. Your talent pipeline is going to dwindle. You're going to wonder why you don't have people. Your reputation matters. I mean, you're a marketing person. Like the value proposition. Like all those things. You really have to the brand. It matters to clients and to candidates.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would think that that's something that, I mean, I'm sure, Felicia, you've got that under control. I don't have to get involved with the interview from the marketing perspective, but it might be something that could slip through the cracks because an employer's thinking, I found my best person. I found the person I wanted. I hired them, and to hell with the 10 other people who came in. But
Right.
I mean, a ton of, like, you want to manage your brand, of course, but I mean, what if you need to go back to that applicant pool and you didn't follow up with any of them or give them a reason why? But I could imagine that be kind of like something that falls through the cracks with a lot of employers.
Well, and a candidate, someone else that they know, I applied with such and such company. They never got back to me. I wouldn't bother applying. That gets around, and the more hiring you do, the more that would happen. Or if they have a chance to use your service in the future, one candidate I was referring to, I think it was a shoe company or something. So like she's probably not going to buy those shoes either, right?
Right, you lost yourself a
Right.
customer. Yeah.
So
It's funny though. I mean, I see this all the time, but like it does happen, and speaking of even tropes, but it kind of is something that you see in movies too. Like the person 10 years ago that is kind of like green, and you never thought of them as necessarily rising to a certain level of anything, but all of a sudden you see them 10 years later, and you're like, I can't believe that they're vice president of whatever, or they're working in this industry, and they really like made something of it. And that's another piece. You want to, it's kind of like just a life lesson in general. Like you want to treat people well wherever they're at, whatever stage they're at. And that definitely applies with the candidates too.
I think that applies in life.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
it's like if you're the type of person that only treats people in a high status,
Exactly.
that's uncool. That's not a good thing.
I heard
You know,
something.
speaks volumes.
This was another one of those clickbait interview question articles, but it was somebody, a CEO of company would bring a candidate, which I think this sounds actually, I kind of like this one, but a CEO would take job candidates to dinner and watch how they interacted with the wait staff, and the questions wouldn't matter. It was really, that's what he was paying attention to.
Yeah.
But that's a huge thing.
It's a huge thing. It speaks to just your character.
Yeah.
I mean, how you treat people, and you know, if you're gonna, what you're gonna be like in the workplace, right? Are you gonna treat everyone well, and you know, be, you know, collegial with everybody, or are you gonna, you know, only talk to the higher ups, or only, you know, or when, yeah,
Yeah,
you all agree on that one.
absolutely.
So, what are some of your best tips for an employer when they're interviewing?
I think to be genuine, to present the true picture. I think it's always nice to let people talk to people that are doing the role, kind of see it. You know, I think that's good. I mean, we tend to tee up our clients pretty well with, you know, all the skills, the references, the reasons from the interviews that we've had. So they're starting, you know, pretty far along in the process, and they're typically good interviewers. So I don't know, they need a lot of advice from me, but yeah.
Well, hey, if someone's just starting out, they might need
Yeah,
some advice.
for sure. And I mean, we certainly have done that. You know, offered interview questions, things like that. We definitely have done that in the past.
To kind of go along with the industry that you're in, I actually wanted to ask you something about on your resume. But school board member of St. Mary's Academy in Long Meadow.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about that, because you probably know we have a ton of independent school clients. Actually, St. Mary's is probably a client because we do the Diocese of Springfield.
Do you?
Yeah.
I was wondering when I saw that. I was like, oh, I wonder.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my son went to that school,
Oh,
and
okay.
I fell in love with it. And
Yeah.
the principal was awesome. And we did some really cool things there, actually, on the board. It's on there, but we did enrollment projects and marketing, kind of introduced them to that, because they weren't doing any of those things that you would do in a professional workplace, right? Because they're a school, and they didn't have the resources.
Well, not only are they're a parochial school,
Yeah.
and my kids go to a parochial school, so I know that they're behind on a lot of that stuff.
They are. Yep, they are. So it was a place you could really make a difference, right? 'Cause
I mean,
you
I
could
love
bring this-
parochial schools, but you know what I mean. They're like,
Yeah. Well, they're under resourced, right?
Exactly,
They
yeah.
really are, and it's a throwback in so many ways, good and bad. You know,
Yes.
but no, we had a phenomenal experience with the school, and my son's been long gone from there, but I stay because just love the teachers. They're so inspiring, and
Yeah.
I feel like it was wonderful that it was there for us, for our family, and I want it to be there for other families. And it's a fine line. I mean, between existing and not existing, right? And they've thrived since the pandemic.
well,
Thankfully.
so many of them have closed. So many parochial schools in particular have
Yeah.
closed and consolidated. I mean, I went to Hoyo Catholic, which no longer is a school, but it combined with Cathedral. Now it's Pope Francis.
It's doing really well.
Yeah, so it is good that they've been able to, you know, they've had to do a lot with a little, but there's hopefully some light at the end of the tunnel. I'll have to revolutionize some of the ways that they're maybe teaching and offer it's hard to compete too, like the athletics. Mm-hmm. Like there's a lot of stuff that you have to be unique to want to go to one of those schools, but also to work in one, because like you said, they're resource strapped. So a lot of the like what they can offer for salaries is a lot less than public schools.
That's
How
the
did you
biggest
help with
thing.
that?
Yeah, that's the biggest thing with the salaries. It's the thing that really bothers me when you see the teachers who like have to have a second job.
Right.
That's the thing we
Yeah.
keep working on, fundraising, trying to raise tuition, but you don't want to raise tuition so it makes it unaffordable for people, because one of the nice things about those schools is it brings people from all walks of life. It's not just like, an elite private school.
Right.
Which would ruin it. It's a really special place, and those teachers, it's a vocation to them. They do it not for the salary, but you don't want to take advantage of them either. Like, they should have a living wage, and they should have,
of course, yeah.
right. So it's that fine line, and it's, there's a whole funding thing from, tuition, and then you have a deficit you can't, meet it with just with tuition. So you have to do a lot of fundraising, and then,
Oh, I didn't
yeah.
realize that. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we do a lot of fundraising, but you don't want to do it on the backs of the parents, because, then again, it's
Yeah.
taxing them.
Like paying tuition still.
It is.
Yeah.
So it's
Like if
something-
you, like, for example, if you send home a box of chocolates with the kid and say everyone has to sell 50 chocolate bars, and every parent says, I guess I just bought 50 chocolate bars. Yeah.
That's exactly what happens. Yes,
Yes.
it is. Yep.
I mean, they're
Yeah.
good. They're good chocolate bars, but that's
Yeah, we're grappling with that now. How
so
much
what
is too
what
much?
was the most, what were some of the more successful fundraising initiatives you did that you thought, oh, this was a good one?
At the Catholic school? So they do a Advent calendar
Mm-hmm.
raffle, and it's they did it for a while with no sponsors, and so they were like collecting fees for the Advent calendars, and then you had chances to win. But they were giving that money out from the ticket sales, so then they got sponsors, so it like exponentially increased what we raised. So that's a nice one, and then the parishioners can participate, not just the family. So that was a good one. Someone just did a golf tournament that's phenomenal, like more like high end, and it doesn't hit the families at all, and it brings in all kinds of resources. So that's good. Then there's like an auction that we do. It's coming up in a couple weeks.
So when you do the golf tournament, is it kind of like the typical type of fundraising golf tournaments where you can sell like whole sponsorships and things like that? Okay.
Yep.
And did the Advent calendar have like chocolates behind each day?
No, not like we remember. No, it's money.
Those are
It's
hard
even
to
better.
find. The ones with the chocolate. I
I
get them
know
for
of
my
one.
kids.
Do you know? Harbor Sweets has a good one.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yep.
Actually, funny, we were talking about Vermont before, and the Vermont Country Store sells the chocolate ones.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, you can order them online.
There's some good chocolate in
Yeah,
Vermont.
yeah.
My kids this year had an advent calendar that was Legos. So
That's a
each
good
day
one.
was like a
Oh,
tiny
that is
Lego
awesome. I never
figure.
heard of that.
It is good, but we have a lot of tiny little Lego figures now.
Oh, and you have a new baby coming. Yeah.
Yeah, those are
Yes.
all over my house also.
Yes. But
I
they're
only-
all over anyways, so
So I only have one child, so one son, and so like he would have 3 Advent calendars. He'd have a chocolate one, he'd have a Lego one, he'd have another one. So a little overkill there. So good
nothing
when you
wrong with
can-
that.
Well, I don't know. That's why I always kept working. Otherwise, the poor kid. Yeah.
yeah. Well, speaking of that, I mean, you must have you had to do a really good job of balancing, your work-life balance, and we talk about that a lot with people just in general today. Obviously, he's grown now, so it's more, I guess, on the work side of things. But how did you manage that? Because you were a mom and raising your small son, and your husband also owns his own business, and you owned your own business. That's a lot to manage. Like, how did you get through that time period?
I'm
very curious.
because you're doing similar. I would really get upset when people say, "Oh, you have it all. You're doing it all," and like, no one's doing it all. Like, don't sell that to women. That's really hard. Like, there's just always trade-offs, and it may look great sometimes, and other times it might not. So no one has figured out the perfect balance. And the balance is different for everyone. What someone's priority is, someone else wouldn't have that priority. So I think it's a balancing act for each individual person, and not one size fits all. But for me, I really wanted to be present at things in school, and like I was, again, on the school board and things like that. I volunteered in the library and the lunchroom, and I was the room mom. I did all that stuff. Sometimes people thought I didn't work, and I'm like, oh, I guess I'm spending too much time here. But I was as involved as, would be comfortable for my son. I was able to work at night being self-employed. It was great. I could make up that time. So for me, it really worked having my own business, because I was accountable to myself and I knew I'd get the work done. So having that flexibility was huge. But, there were times where, sometimes work had to be priority. If there was something really big happening or, critical, that would happen. Having a good team made a big difference at the office. We kind of had each other's back. So if something big was happening, one of our families, the other person would sort of shuffle in. And so a lot of cross-training that way, that helped. But always something gives, right? Like you don't get the vacation time. I didn't read a lot of books in those years. Now I'm like excited. Oh, empty nest, I'll read more books.
I can't remember the last time I read a book.
It's important for we talked about it a little bit, just the candidate experience for employers. It goes from the first, responding to a job ad, but then the interview process, how long it takes. If it takes too long, candidates are disengaged. Candidates, the perception is it should take 2 weeks. Obviously, like big companies, it can take, 60 to 90 days to get someone hired. So I think you have to think about that as an employer. And then the onboarding, right? How we onboard makes a difference because people are deciding in the first few weeks if this place is for them or not. They're really trying to do that. And then employee engagement. So I think thinking about all those things, the whole process will make a big difference in retention and then how satisfied you are. Because if you end up in a like a sort of a whirlpool, right, of like constantly back and forth. If like the person doesn't work out, then you have to hire a new person, and it's just a lot of effort and energy. So it's sometimes worth putting the time in. So that's just, I think, recruitment best practice now for companies, really looking at that. We talked about like, brand, protecting your brand in recruiting, because employers that hire a lot and don't do a good job of it, they do get a reputation in the community. We've seen that before. And it's like, you try so hard to help them, but that can happen. So I think,
that piece is going to be on them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. There are candidates with their perception is completely, not realistic. That happens too, but it happens on the employer side too, right? Like, so it's like, you can't expect, 5 interviews and all these steps and hoops for someone to go through. And then, you don't respond to them. That's tough. Mm-hmm. So it's just we're all busy, but there's certain things I think that will make the process smoother on both ends.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Checkwriters. Be sure to follow us on Apple, YouTube, or wherever you view your favorite podcasts. Stay tuned for future episodes where we'll continue to uncover the secrets behind successful organizations.